Hey, how y'all doing? That's great. And yes, I am pouring my wine in a plastic cup instead of a glass, because I'm not some kind of classy, pretty bitch. I'm just a pretty bitch. Uh, I told you I'd make this video, reviewing encouraging heterosexuality, helping children develop a traditional sexual orientation. And also, how could I forget, burning this piece of shit. I'm going to try to make this as short as possible because I have other vids I've been wanting to work on. I'm just going to give a quick rundown of each of the chapters because I feel weird burning a book, and I need y'all to know the contents of this book so that this burning feels justified, because full frontal honesty, didn't think I'd ever burn a book, but at the same time I didn't think I'd ever encounter a book that I believed deserved to be burned, and that's definitely this book. But first time for everything, I guess, except some things. And I know that you know what things I'm thinking of. Anyway, the only background info, I guess, that I'm going to give on this book is the description on the back, which is: Doctors Abbott and Bird are Christian scholars who make a case for encouraging heterosexuality and provide parents with ideas to help children develop a traditional sexual preference. With many voices speaking on this issue, this book offers a unique approach which unapologetically demonstrates how faith, tradition, and science are complementary in the research for truth about what is best for children. No, they aren't. Their message is simple and clear. Parents can prefer and encourage heterosexuality in their children and can do so without disrespect or criticism for those who believe or act differently. And I'll go and tell you, because I read the book, no, you can't. You can't do that without disrespecting a gay person. I'm not gonna even bother trying to Google any info on these authors, mainly because who gives a fuck, okay? And also, I did, and I didn't find much other than their names. So, chapter 1 is called Introduction. It mainly just gives an overview of the other chapters, where before that they try to make it seem like two gay people agreeing with them makes them right. It is interesting that LaVey and Hammer, both self-identified homosexuals, make our same argument. LaVey states, first, science itself cannot render judgments about human worth or about what constitutes normality or disease. These are value judgments that individuals must make for themselves while taking scientific findings into account. Hammer concludes, biology is amoral. It offers no help in distinguishing between right and wrong. Only people guided by their values and beliefs can decide what is moral and what is not. This chapter also goes over the author's purpose and a preview of the book, which is: we present 3 controversial propositions. First, we posit that heterosexuality is innate and natural, and that heterosexuality is the most healthy and functional sexual orientation. Second, we propose that one's sexual orientation can be fostered and encouraged early in development to strengthen a child's heterosexual potential. Third, we believe that if something goes awry in the person's psychological, social, biological environment, and he or she engages in homosexual behavior, that person can return to a heterosexual orientation. The term sexual orientation is used by all mental health professionals because it implies a biological predestination, i.e., that genetics and hormones determine sexual orientation. We prefer to use the term sexual preference because it suggests both choice and the possibility of change. Also, sexual preference does not rule out the influence of other factors on shaping one's sexual orientation. Chapter 2, Assumptions and Concepts. This chapter goes over the author's 5 assumptions that they base their thesis on. Right here, our thesis that a heterosexual orientation should be preferred and encouraged is built upon 5 assumptions. First, we believe that there is something beyond our senses, something out of reach of the scientific method. Our second assumption is that heterosexuality is the innate design for humankind. Our third assumption is that homosexual behavior is not a mental illness, but an adaptation that involves moral choice. I mean, it isn't a mental illness, everyone agrees on that, but also it's not really a choice, and it's definitely not a moral one at that, just putting that out there. Fourth, we believe that widespread social acceptance of homosexuality will undermine the viability and desirability of the two-parent heterosexual family. Since the 1970s, many people have argued that all family forms are equally good, i.e., healthy, functional, nurturing, and that there was no advantage for a child to have a biological two-parent family. But this view has been discredited by the huge amount of social scientific data that demonstrate that, in general, a child reared in a heterosexual two-parent family does better emotionally, socially, and academically than the average child raised in other types. Now, the way that this whole book is written is that they have their sources and they put, the little numbers on them to lead to the appendix. So if we go to appendix chapter 2, 11, the source for that statement right there, that a child reared in a heterosexual two-parent family does better emotionally, socially, and academically than the average child raised in other types of families, that source is about absent fathers. It says, it's by Balcom D.A., 1998, Absent Fathers, Effects on Abandoned Sons. It's not even about, it doesn't say anything about it being a heterosexual family. It's talking about it being a single-parent family. You're cherry picking, man. Okay. Our fifth and last assumption is the most controversial and the one most likely to upset and offend those who disagree with us. I'll go and let you know, yes, it does. We believe that the widespread acceptance and legal recognition of homosexual behavior will lead to the exploitation of children by adults. As homosexuality is integrated into our society, adult-child sex will become more common. No, it won't. For some individuals, sex with minors is not always considered harmful and abusive. In fact, in her book, Harmful to Minors, published by the University of Minnesota Press, Judith Levine suggested that children should not be protected from sex with adults. Well, fuck what Levine thinks, okay? That's not because she's gay or anything. That's because she's a sick fuck. Anyway, Levine concludes that sex between children and adults isn't a bad thing if it's done right. No, it's always a bad thing. Always, no matter what. If it's done right, that children should be allowed to consent to sex with adults. No. And with each other. No. Levine states teens often seek out sex with older people, and they do so for understandable reasons. No, they don't. An older person makes them feel sexy and grown up, protected and special. Often the sex is better than it would be with a peer who has a little skills they do. No. Numerous academics also support Levine's position that child-adult sex is not inherently wrong. Yes, it is. Though most gays and lesbians will not openly condone sex with children because they don't. just because someone is attracted to kids doesn't mean they're gay. It means they're fucked up and they got a weird ass fetish, and I don't get it. There is nevertheless an intersection of common ground between the gay rights agenda and efforts of some gays and lesbians to decriminalize consensual sex between adults and adolescents. There isn't an intersection. I don't know where they got that from. At the end of this chapter, there are definitions of key concepts. I'm not going to cover all of them, but I'll list them somewhere on the screen. I do want to at least point out that they got, I guess, the definition of sex and gender right, which is many professionals and members of the lay public, fuck you, have confused the terms sex and gender and tend to use the two terms interchangeably. Sex refers to biological sex, whether a person is male or female based on genes and genitals. However, gender refers to what it means to be male or female. Many self-identified gays and lesbians report no confusion about whether they are male or female. Rather, the difficulties emerge in what it means to be male or female. This is a gender identity issue. Chapter 3, Existing Theories of Homosexuality. So this chapter goes over the current theories of what causes homosexuality. It mentions a theory that's based on whether or not there's a gay gene. There isn't, according to this book, but personally, I don't know. As there's also a theory of if abnormal levels of sex hormones make you gay. Again, personally, I don't know. The authors do come to and agree with the conclusion that genes and hormones might have an indirect influence on your orientation, but probably don't, determine or cause it. Which, full frontal honesty, I think I kind of agree with that. The next theory that it goes into is the psychoanalytic theory. Basically, this theory is, and I quote, "In essence, a man or woman's homosexual behavior is rooted in pathological parent-child relationships. In most cases, the child is exposed to a father who is weak, uninvolved, rejecting, and/or abusive. The child's mother is often dominant, overprotective, smothering, and/or seductive. The child's intimate and continual interaction with these parents produces a gender identity deficient, and the child fails to internalize a strong sense of manhood or womanhood." First off, why does anyone even need a strong sense of manhood or womanhood? You can be both. And also, if a boy wants to be in touch with his womanhood or a girl wants to be in touch with her manhood, there's nothing wrong with that. They don't need to be mutually exclusive to a gender or sex, but whatever. Davies and Zer, commented on this process. Many people experience some degree of rejection in their early years, but when a little boy fails to connect with his dad and a little girl doesn't form a close relationship with her mother, the groundwork is laid for future gender identity struggles. That's why you just gotta find your shit, man. You gotta find yourself. Go on a journey. Fuck me. From there, we get into the social learning theory. Basically, this theory exists to blame homosexuality on the media, TV, music, books. Let me read y'all a bit real quick, because I got some things to say about it. The dominant message of the media is that youth should become sexually active and experiment with sexual behavior, even with homosexual behavior. 2 studies by Rand Corporation demonstrated that watching TV shows with sexual content hastens the initiation of teen sexual activity. Non-marital sex is glamorized by the media, and homosexuality and bisexuality are considered cool or hip. The media is overwhelmingly gay affirming. Hence, some youth may be tempted to try out the thinking and behavior of homosexuality because of the positive role modeling of homosexuality in the media. Okay, I don't know if I've said it already or not. I don't think I did. But this book was published in August 2009. And it's trying to convince you that being gay or bi was considered cool and hip at this time. But that's just hetero up bullshit. If you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. But on the fact that same-sex marriage wasn't nationally legal until 2015. So I think if being gay was glamorized at the time, then same-sex marriage would have been legal then, instead of queer people getting the everything but marriage domestic partnership bill. You know what a domestic partnership is, right? It's literally marriage with a different name, and it doesn't affect your taxes the same way as being married. But it's still essentially marriage. And I know y'all are thinking, but Justin, any couple can become a domestic partnership. And to that I say, yeah, you're right. But shut your... Sorry, that was a little too mean. But if you Google that shit, you'll learn that it was put in place with the intentions of being an alternative of marriage for same-sex couples. Because, and I'm only guessing here, just estimating, but I think it's because straight people were the ones that had a problem with gay people for being gay and wanting to be married. Okay, the last theory in this chapter is called the interactional theory, which is the theory that both genetics and environmental influences develop your orientation. And within that theory, there's a theory by someone named Stein. It seriously just says Stein. Whatever. He calls his theory non-determinism. Non-determinism is the view that a person does not consciously choose his or her sexual orientation, but that indirect choices influenced by biological factors play a role in the development of sexual orientation. In other words, early in life, a child may make small choices that may unintentionally affect the child's later sexual desires and preferences, which that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But they give us an example. For example, suppose a little boy born with a gentle, sensitive temperament that doesn't... How's being gentle and sensitive have anything to do with being gay? Whatever. Whose mother would have preferred a girl. Poor kid. But also, if he was raised like a girl, who cares? As long as he's into that, who gives a shit? Was encouraged by his parents to prefer girls' clothes, toys, and tea parties. Okay, but if he actually genuinely likes that shit, then what's the problem? There is no problem. Because of his innate personality and support from his mother, he may be persuaded to play with dolls instead of throwing
balls.
Yeah, because throwing
balls
it's fucking boring, dude. Yeah. Cool. You caught it. Now throw it back. So fun. As he grows, he is kept away from rough and tumble play, or he chooses to avoid it. Yeah, and if it's his choice, then that's fine. And is exposed to music and poetry where he has some... So, music and poetry is gay now? What? These conditions may later indirectly influence his emerging sexual orientation. As a teenage boy, he may attempt to flirt with girls, but due to his appearance or mannerisms, he is rejected. In addition, his father may ridicule him for his sissy-like behavior. Oh, this poor kid. The cumulative effect of innate temperament and social conditioning may increase the likelihood that the youth will consider homosexuality as an option. In sum, interactional theory seems to be a reasonable alternative to either the biogenetic or social learning explanations. Well, yeah, because it's pretty much both of them put together. Interactional theory combines, this is what I just said, combines elements of both and proposes that biologically based personality traits nurtured in a particular family and social environment may lead to homosexuality. Chapter 4, Agency in Sexual Behavior. Okay, so this is the chapter where they talk about the importance of moral agency in choices in shaping homosexual behavior, and really hammer down the fact that the authors are super Christian and they only wrote this book because they believe that being gay is wrong, evil, and cruel. And I'd like to note that they only believe this because some old ass crusty and dusty book told them to. And yes, I just called the Bible an old ass crusty and dusty book because, hey, it kinda is. But let's first talk about the irony of a section here called A Religious Understanding of Moral Agency. Williams proposed a view of agency that is a twofold process. First, there must be knowledge of truth, the Bible, and second, one can make the decision to live truthfully or not. Agency does not consist chiefly in doing what we want, i.e. choosing between amoral alternatives, but in doing what we should do, i.e. knowing true principles and deciding to live by them. Human freedom does not simply mean doing whatever one wants, Needleman explains. This is a childish idea. A mature vision of freedom, a religious vision of freedom, implies voluntary obedience to the higher laws of conscience, i.e. the laws of God. Okay, but you can't call a religious vision of freedom because it isn't freedom. Basing all your beliefs and doing everything you do based on an old ass crusty and dusty book, that's not freedom, especially because in the words it says implies voluntary obedience to the higher what? Voluntary obedience? How? That's not freedom. Before I go any further into this chapter, I need to give y'all their definition of moral agency, and that is, moral agency is the ability to choose right over wrong, good over evil, kindness instead of cruelty. With agency, one can choose not to act upon an unethical or immoral impulse. But there's nothing unethical or immoral about being gay. And just because a book says so doesn't mean it's right. And also, there's never going to be a book that's going to be able to convince me that being gay is wrong. That's just stupid. It's dumb. Now let me read y'all the bit where they try their very best to use a vague Bible verse to somehow connect homosexuality to immoral feelings and sinful inclinations. Another way to understand the role of moral agency in same-sex behavior is to consider the words of Paul, the Christian missionary who lived during the time of Jesus. He traveled and preached extensively from Palestine to Greece from AD 50 to AD 65. In Paul's second epistle, E-P-I-S-T-L-E, I don't fucking know, to the believers in Corinth, Greece, circa AD 57, he made a surprising revelation. There was given me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan, to buffet me. The New Testament, 2. New Testament, 2 Corinthians 12:7. Can you tell I haven't been to church in a while because I don't know how to read a freaking Bible verse anymore? We think Paul was saying this: I could become arrogant and proud because of all of my accomplishments. I might even believe I can save myself by my good words in many years of service to God, but God has given me a weakness that humbles me and reminds me of my dependence on Him, and that it is by His grace that I am saved. How did you interpret a longer? They interpreted like a paragraph out of a frickin' sentence. What? What the hell? Paul's thorn was probably some immoral feeling or sinful inclination. 3 times Paul tried to pray it away and ask God to remove the unholy thing, but God declined and said, "My grace is sufficient for thee, and your weakness will make you stronger in the end, because you will rely on me, the Lord." 2 Corinthians 12:19. Okay, but why do you want to rely on anyone, even a God? Like, what's the point? Everyone disappoints. Don't rely on people. Note that Paul's thorn was not something he acted upon. It was something he felt, and felt strongly, but apparently did not do. The scriptures never mention Paul's wife or family, so let's suppose he struggled with homosexual attraction. That was the thorn in his side. We have no idea what it really was. Then why did you just say that was the thorn in his side? Like, that was it. But we have no idea what it really was. But it works for the sake of for illustrating a point. No. I think the only point that the verse was trying to illustrate was the point on the thorn in his side. Thank you. I didn't try that hard for that joke. Towards the end of this chapter, the authors compare homosexual attraction to addiction. Wait, what? Given our interpretation of moral agency, homosexual attraction for many individuals may simply be a test, a thorn in the flesh, a specific trial that some must endure while most others do not. This challenge is not unlike others who are tested with a severe disability, a life of poverty, or with overeating or addictions to alcohol, gambling, or pornography. For example, compare homosexuality to an addiction like alcohol or gambling. A person may have an innate sustainability to alcohol or personality traits that put him at a risk for gambling, but in the beginning, the whiskey or the poker games were choices. Over time, the booze or blackjack became a compulsion and eventually an addiction that makes the exercise of agency more difficult. But there's no need for the exercise of agency for being gay. There's no problem with it. So why are y'all acting like there's a problem with it? Oh, right, because an old-ass crusty and dusty book told you to. Chapter 5. A new theory of homosexuality. In this chapter, the authors propose 3 pathways for the development of homosexuality. They do this through the use of 3 models, but before they get into the details of these models, this is what the authors have to say about them. Caution. The 3 models are simplistic examples of the factors, forces, and conditions that may contribute to a preference for same-sex partners, but the final outcome, homosexuality, cannot be reduced to the simple presence or absence of any of these factors. There may be other influences not yet identified that may be influential. The models will only show how various forces and factors may interact to encourage homosexuality. The case studies presented below are fictional. Fictional? So wait, all three of them are fictional? What? Then why are they presented like hard evidence if they're fictional? They're fictional. They're fake. They wrote them? You can't use a fictional case study for the purpose of proving a point. Fictional case studies should only be used for the purpose of teaching people how to read and write case studies if they're going into a career that requires it. You know? Like, it's just, what? Because, hot take, fiction isn't fucking evidence. Near the end, they try to back these purely hypothetical examples by saying these three models acknowledge the possible influence of psychosocial factors and biology, yet they recognize that agency, the freedom to make choices, plays an important part in the process. Abby, Brent, and Charles, those were the three examples. Purely fictional examples, don't forget. They're not real. Abby, Brent, and Charles represent different pathways to similar, though not identical, ends. They experience homosexuality differently because they have different histories, motivations, and emotional and social conditioning. Yeah, but everyone experiences their sexuality differently, even the hets. What? Okay, the last section in this chapter is called Similar Background but Different Outcome. We realize that there are some youth, for example, let's call one such fellow Harry, who have had a life story similar to Abby, Brent, or Charles, and yet turned out to be heterosexual. So how can we explain this? Well, you see, Harry was a good, God-fearing Christian boy that realized that having gay thoughts, desires, and behaviors was nothing more than sin.
And if he was gay in any way, then he would be damned to hell for the rest of eternity with the rest of the gay sinners.
Fuck. An answer is that with Harry, those conditions that might tilt him toward homosexuality existed in different proportions and in a different temporal sequence than with Abby, Brent, and Charles. Like Abby and Charles, Harry was exposed to pornography and liberal sexual morals in the home, but he spent much of his time at a friend's home where heterosexuality was expected. Gross. In addition, Harry was more resilient to stress and family dysfunction than was Brent. And last, Harry's moral agency, his freedom to choose, even though it's really not, because basically what they were saying with moral agency is that your choices are already laid out, so that's not really the freedom of choice, was a more potent factor in influencing sexual attraction. So in the end, Harry met Sally and his... Did they name this purely hypothetical character Harry just so they can make a fucking Harry met Sally joke? Harry met Sally and is heterosexual? Fuck you. While Abby and Charles are homosexual and Brent is bisexual. Remember that these models are simplified. No, they're fiction. The development of homosexuality is more intricate and complicated than these examples. No shit. Our scenarios, however, may represent probable pathways to homosexual outcomes. No, your scenarios, what'd they fucking say? Your scenarios represent a probable pathway to y'all being fiction writers. And not good ones at that. Chapter 6, Practical Advice for Parents. And we finally get to the chapter with the practical advice for parents. Our parenting recommendations are gleaned from the theories and research presented in Chapter 3 and from our own Christian beliefs. In Figure 2, Family Influences on Child's Sexual Preference, there are 3 theories on the far left: psychoanalytic, social learning, and Christian family, and each theory leads to 2 or more interventions, represented by the seven rectangular boxes in the middle of the diagram. We believe these 7 interventions will influence the child's heterosexual preference, the large rectangle on the far right. We will discuss each of the 7 interventions in the order they are depicted in Figure 2. At the end of this section, we will briefly outline warning signs of pre-homosexuality where psychotherapy may be warranted. But we will not discuss therapy for a child with gender identity confusion and homosexual inclinations, nor will we provide a description of reorientation therapy for those who want to change their sexual preference. There are many resources available on these topics. An excellent resource for parents who want more detailed information can be found in Joseph and Linda Nicolausi's book, A Parent's Guide to Preventing Homosexuality. What? I really thought this would be the worst title of any book out there, just encouraging heterosexuality. But of course it gets worse with it literally is preventing homosexual. It's not something you need to prevent, even if it's something that's preventable. What? I don't get it, man. I really don't. Like, what the hell, my guy? Anyway, from there, it goes into the 7 suggestions for fostering heterosexuality, which are: 1. Build healthy parent-child relationships. No shit. 2. Create a happy marriage. Honestly, not always an option. 3. Encourage healthy same-sex friendships and child. Doesn't matter who your child is friends with, okay? 4. Guard your children from sexualization by the media. Even though the sexuality that is mostly depicted in all media, adult and children, it's mostly heterosexuality. So why would I need to protect my kid from seeing a heterosexual relationship on the TV when this book is telling me that my kids have to be heterosexual? Whatever. 5. Remediate sexual abuse. No shit, of course. Duh. 6. I don't know what I'm doing with my hand now. 6. Provide value-based sex education at home. And I just want to mention, by value-based, they most definitely mean Christian-based. That's their only basis for value-based. That's what they mean. And 7, teaching personal responsibility, the role of agency. At the end of this chapter, they of course give their summary for their practical advice for parents. The critical components that will strengthen a child's heterosexual potential. God, I hate those 2 words together. Heterosexual potential are: A, the parent's relatively happy and stable marriage. B, healthy parent-child relationships. C, helping the child avoid the evil influences in society that promote sexual promiscuity. And D, teaching the child true principles of human sexuality and the reality of moral agency. The other specific suggestions are of secondary nature. Yeah, you know, the one that says remediate sexual abuse, which, I mean, I get it. It's probably because it's not something that's going to happen to every child. But I just want to go ahead and point out, like, the first paragraph on here for the remediate sexual abuse is: children who have suffered sexual abuse should receive professional assessment and therapy. Sexual abuse derails the normal development of a heterosexual preference. A sexually abused child is more likely to experiment with early sexual behavior and is more likely to question his or her sexual preference. Choose a therapist carefully. A parent should interview the therapist before treatment begins. The goal of therapy should be agreed upon by the parent and therapist. And I'm getting the feeling that what they mean, but the authors, I think what the authors mean by the goal is making sure your child isn't gay. And if that's your goal for your kid's therapy, then fuck you. Because your number one goal for your kid in therapy should them being, helped, them being healed, Dr. PhD, whatever. My kid, he's recently been sexually abused, and I'm real worried about him. Just, you're worried about him just having problems, maybe fitting in because he has been abused, and he may feel like there aren't other kids that can relate. Nah, I'm worried about him being a little homosexual. Like, nah, son, he ain't gonna be my son if he's gay. Lastly, the reader should be aware that our specific parenting advice has not been empirically tested by research. We cannot tell you there is a strong scientific evidence to support our recommendations. Then why did you write the book like you have all the answers when you don't? Like, you write all the shit being like, yeah, this is true, facts, factual evidence, and then be like, but our evidence doesn't actually support what we're saying, even though we're presenting it as evidence. Chapter 7. Conclusions. Okay, we're finally at the last chapter, which is called Conclusions. So I'm not going to go into this chapter much, if at all, because I'm done with it. It hurt to read this. Like, it actually hurt, and I really just want to burn it. Like I think I got my point across. So I'll just give you all my conclusions of this book. So in conclusion, this book tries its very best to not make it seem like it is bigoted and homophobic, but it actively and continually portrays being gay as immoral, wrong, unhealthy, and even evil. So, fuck this book, because being gay is none of those things. It's not. There's no evidence for it. There will never be evidence for it, because it's just not true whatsoever in any way, shape, or form. Just because a old ass book tells you it is doesn't mean it is, okay? It just baffles me that a parent would unironically buy this book with the intentions and goal of trying to make sure their child isn't gay. Like, I don't understand why people fucking care what their kid's orientation is. Like, I get it if your religious beliefs are that it's a sin and you'll go to hell for it, and you're worried about your child going to hell, but still, why wouldn't you just at least try to inform yourself a bit, maybe try to think for yourself and be like, oh, hey, why has the Bible been saying being gay is wrong when my son, he's in a loving gay relationship and they love each other and they treat each other with respect. So what? Why is it a sin? I don't know. I really don't know. All right.
I can't believe I got through this whole damn
disgusting
thing.
book. Now, if y'all don't mind, I'm gonna go burn this and possibly piss on its ashes. That's all I got. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it. Have a beautiful day or night.